No, you've never met them. Okay. All right.
You know,
So they're from India, so they're the Jain nuns, and so they're teaching a couple courses here. And so we're very honored to have them give us a lecture. So the course that we're doing this semester is focusing on language and religion, right? And so Samaniji Rohini is going to be talking to us about the sacred sounds in Jainism.
Yeah. Good morning, all of you, and I say my mantra, Arham, to all of you to bring that energy of divine omniscience around us. And I feel very privileged to be in your class and to talk on this topic of sacred sound and sacred language, the notion of sacred language that is present in Jainism, which is almost present in all traditions and all religious faith systems. So, Professor Akhtar, thank you very much. Now I proceed to my topic. So I want to begin the topic from philosophy to the sacred sounds in Jainism. So how does this notion of sacredness is associated, or when did it started with, and what are the reasons behind introducing this notion of sacred or divine with the language itself? So from philosophy, I see Jain tradition having its foundation in its philosophical aspect, and it's more a kind of lifestyle or an understanding of reality, and based on that the ethics and the notion of episteme are developed. So I would like to begin from the foundational aspect and then enter into understanding how the notion of sacred is then becoming linked up with that ideology. So next, can I go to the next? So to begin with, the Jain text or Jain belief begins with the idea that there is an omniscient knowledge. So they categorize knowledge into 5 types, of which one of it is the omniscience. Omniscience is a knowledge which is considered to be a pure and perfect state of knowledge, and they associate this with their metaphysical understanding. It comes to all life forms. It is possible to have this knowledge. It is potentially available in all of us, but it requires to have purity expanded in our heart, in our mind, in order to actualize it. And when one individual actualizes that state of purity, one achieves, or one naturally, the omniscience naturally opens up. So it is not something to be achieved, it is there right within us. It discloses itself when the purity level is enhanced. So the notion of omniscience is directly associated with purity of our heart, the purity of our mind, and they associate this purity with the elimination of all karmic ailments. So according to Jain belief, the soul, that is the conscious energy, and the karmas, the material energy, are interconnected naturally from the beginningless time. There is a beginningless time connection between karma and the conscious energy, the conscious power. So this association can be complete. We can end this association if we choose the right path, and we can dissociate, we can separate these two energy. And when this separation happens, when the karmic energy, which is material energy, is completely eliminated from the conscious energy, the state that we manifest in ourselves is known as a state of omniscience. That is the idea. So it is the omniscience is not a kind of magical gift or any kind of divine blessing that we receive, but it is an every individual's striving towards the direction of purifying oneself. And Jainism does not believe in God as a creator of this universe or who bestowed this knowledge to us. It is available, it is present, naturally present in all life forms. There is only a path that we have to follow in order to discover our true self. That's the idea. So the notion of enlightened beings is very strong. It is present, and it accepts that there are individuals who have achieved this state. Not 1, 2, 3, many individuals have already achieved this state of enlightenment, and it is open for coming centuries that many people will be enlightened. So in many people enlightened in the past will enlighten in the present, and so also they will enlighten in future. Okay, we have to discover that path. So this is basic foundation, philosophical foundation of Jainism. And when they achieve this omniscience, these beings, these great people, they try to bring that knowledge to share with people, with the community. Okay, and the sharing of that knowledge through these great people is basically, it started with an oracle tradition. So writing was not still discovered, and it was transmitted through oracles. It was preached, their sermons were held, they were preached, and people will carry those words through memory and take them to work on that path. So, but gradually, after and the existing, this is one of the Jain texts. So there is the teachings, the scripture. This is one of the book. So Jainism have many books as their sacred book. So it's not just one book like a Bible in Christianity or one book like a Quran in Islam, but they have many set of books, and all those are considered to be the teachings of the enlightened person. And the last which exists, to whom we are following, is called as the 24th Tirthankar, Lord Mahavir. So there is a series of 24 great people, of which the 24th is Lord Mahavir, and what is existing through this carried oracle traditions, the language and the words of Mahavir are still preserved, it is believed, and it is codified in this text called as Agams. I'll be coming to this idea of what Agams is basically. Okay, so let me go to the first one again, I believe. Yeah. But okay, so with the oracle traditions, this knowledge was carried, but slowly, gradually, with the loss of memory, okay, the loss of memory, and because of the climate changes, Jainism believes that naturally we acquire a few things, but also naturally we lost few things with the change in time and with the change in this. They have this whole notion of time cycle in which they have ascending and descending sections. So in the descending cycle, things will lose the capacity that they previously had. So I'm not going into the whole notion of time cycle in Jainism, but so according to Jain belief, at present we are in a declining stage. So things are, in nature, everything is getting declined. So also the memory, the power of memory that human beings had gradually will diminish. This was the idea, and that happened, and because of which the scholars and the great preceptors who were holding this knowledge, they thought of codifying the text. And this ascetics, the Jain ascetics, are like wandering ascetics, and they are minimalist. They don't hold anything. They don't have their house. They don't have their property. They are just wandering ascetics. Okay, so they don't hold books and kind of stuff with them. So these monks, who was a big group of scholars, because of some of the natural challenges, they moved in different directions. As they went in different directions, they tried to preach those words of these great people in the way that was suitable for the people in that community, in that context. And so there were a little bit of difference in commentaries that were coming up with the wordings, because they were making relevant to those communities and those people in which they were traveling. Okay, so they found, after a span of time, they found that the original word of Mahavir are being interpreted in different ways. And they found that it is a time we should codify them so that the original words and original sayings are preserved. So with that idea, they gathered these great scholars from different locations. They decided a place of where they can meet, and then start writing them in manuscripts, converting them into manuscripts so that there can be no loss of that huge knowledge that the Omniscient, the Tirthankars have given to the audience. So with that idea, Jain traditions is believed to have 4 councils. Okay, the 4 councils were held, and there were great masters who were well versed in some sections, the other one in other sections. So they were bringing up their own informations, and finally there were also discussions and debates of differences in interpretation of the things that were preserved. So finally they agreed, and in these 4 councils, for the first time, Jain tradition got divided into 2 great schemes, Shvetambars and Digambars. Okay, so the words were carried, but there were few differences in the interpretation based on which these 2 groups were framed as 2 great schisms of Jainism, as the Shvetambars and the Digambars. So one of the basic difference, there are many differences between these 2 traditions, how they look to the words of the great enlightened beings. The one group, the first group, which is a very strong and prominent up to now, both of them are strong actually. So the Shvetambar group is the group which says that we have the original words of Mahavir as they were delivered. Okay, without any kind of loss. So we still have those things that has been that can be considered to be the original words, while the other group says that no, nothing has been remained original, everything is lost. With the way we were going through these changes and with the way we were expanding ourselves, we were moving in different directions because of one or the other reasons, we have lost those original sayings, but what we have is simply what we can trace from our memory and understanding. So there is no original intact words that are preserved up to now of the original wordings of Mahavir. So this is one of the basic differences. Well, they have different other differences. I'm not going deep into that because we are concerned basically with the sacredness of the language. So in these 4 councils, the scholars that they codified everything that were in their memory, they turned into these books. And this one group considered this to be the authoritative books. And they are the original words of Mahavir, but the other group does not. They reject that authority of those words within Jain tradition itself. Okay? I'm not going into the Digambar tradition, how they develop their own resources based on their memory and how they consider those books as the authority books having authority. Okay, but they also develop books which hold a standard position of being authoritative in their own tradition. And then not only that, the words were codified and accepted or rejected, but also the contemporary ideas, the contemporary concepts and notions that were flourishing and were making very much sense to the people of that age and of that time, they were also introduced in the main wordings or in the main teachings of these enlightened beings. So additional literature was also added during these 4 councils to give them the authoritative status. So the original plus additional thing was also added into this inner corpus that is the primary source of Jainism. And they gained the status of authority. Okay, so something was added to that already existing knowledge, and they were also given that position of authority in Jain traditions. Can you go to next? Okay, so what kind of language does this text have? The primary sources which have an authority have. These sacred books of Jainism are called as Agams. Not one book, all the book, the set of books. 1, 2, 3, 4, according to some tradition, there are 32 books which are sacred. According to others, there are 58. Some other group of people of Jain tradition believe that there are 78 books which are the authoritative books. So there is a difference in number, but the essence more or less is almost common. Not only to the Shwetambar tradition, but also to the Digambar tradition. The philosophical ideology, the metaphysical understanding of Jainism is almost common to the whole group. So all believe that the things that we are having in our conversation are the words of Mahavir. So there is no contradiction or debate upon the person. All agree to the teachings of Mahavir, first. Number second, there is no any difference in the metaphysical as foundation of Jainism, either in Shwetambar or in Digambar. Metaphysically, they admit everything, that there is soul, there is consciousness, there is karma, and there is a path of liberation, and liberation can be achieved. This common fundamental philosophical assumptions are admitted by the whole group, irrespective of whether Shwetambars and Digambars. So these books, for the Shwetambar traditions who have accepted that to be the words of Lord Mahavir, are considered to be Agams. So the whole set of 32 books are considered to be Agams. Just like the three Pitaks of Buddhism, Jainism have this Agams. And these texts are written in the language which is called as Ardha Magadhi. It was a language that was prevalent in that time. 599 to 527 BC is the time period of Lord Mahavir, and the very common language that was used, the very local language that was used during that period in that geographical location was Ardha Magadhi. This was a popular language it was a language of people actually. Okay, so the basic language was the Prakrit language, and the subcategory of Prakrit language was the Ardha Magadhi language. So the Prakrit language have various variations, just like the English language have various European English, the American English, right? Similarly, the Prakrit language has like Maharashtri Prakrit, Ardha Magadhi Prakrit, Saursheni Prakrit. So based on the locality, they were divided into various sections. But the language was Prakrit, and the Jain Agams, the Jain texts are codified in the language which is called as Ardha Magadhi language. We have courses on Ardha Magadhi language here in FIU. Professor Stephen Bose is the professor, and he's teaching this language. So there are students who are coming and studying this language as well. Even in FIU, we have courses on this Prakrit language here. Okay, and this language is considered to be the language of omniscient, that is Jinn. Jinn is one who is the victor and who has overcome the karmic bondage. Okay, they have conquered with the karmas, and therefore they are known as victors. And the language of Jinn was Prakrit, it was common language, but as it was the language of Jinn, okay, the language became very important. As it was brought in that language, as the enlightened insight of these jinns were brought in the language of Prakrit, it became important for the people to understand that language as well. And these jinns are known as omniscient or Kevalis because they achieve this pure and perfect knowledge. As they have mastered this pure and perfect knowledge, their knowledge is known as omniscience. Keval Gyan is the omniscience knowledge, and it is the highest form of knowledge. Highest form of knowledge. The first form of knowledge is perceptual knowledge. We all have that. The knowledge that we acquire through sense and mind is perceptual knowledge. The second is verbal knowledge. The knowledge that we acquire through interacting with each other, through letters, through symbols, is known as verbal knowledge. We all have that. In fact, Jainism admits that all life forms, irrespective of whether they are five-sensed or one-sensed, they will have at least two forms of knowledge, the perceptual and the verbal knowledge. These two knowledge is available to all life forms. And these are basically empirical knowledges. But Jainism also admits that there are three other forms of knowledge which are considered to be transcendental knowledge: clairvoyance, mind reading, and omniscient. Clairvoyance is a knowledge in which an individual can have information about the objects of the world without direct contact of sense and mind. So it is a knowledge which is beyond sense and mind, but only the knowledge of objects, not of individual mind. The fourth one is the mind reading, in which an individual acquires the power to know or read the other's mind. This is called as a mind reading, fourth advanced form of knowledge. And the fifth is considered to be the omniscience, and this is called to be the highest knowledge, the highest form of knowledge. So these enlightened beings have acquired or have disclosed this form of pure and highest knowledge. And when they achieve this knowledge, jinns become apta. Apta, the meaning of this is a Sanskrit term, apta, which means one who knows the truth and who also transforms the truth, transmit the truth as it is. Knows the truth as it is and then delivers the truth as it is. Knowing the truth as it is and then transforming or translating or transmitting the knowledge as it is, without any what they call it, molding it, or without any kind of anything added additional. It is as it is. It is transformed. It is reflected, and it is transferred, delivered as it is, without any change. And based on that information and that knowledge, this omniscient knowledge, as it is, and therefore as it comes from the omniscient, it becomes sacred. Okay, so basically, if we look to the definition of apta, there is no idea of language as something sacred, but the words, because of this quality of pure and perfect state, because it's not the Magdi language that is sacred, but as it is coming through this jinnas, through the words of Jinn, through the words of an omniscient being, which makes that language or that information sacred. So up to here, we don't find that Jainism is focusing, or it is emphasizing the sacredness of the language itself, but the words, because it is coming through the source of those words is purity. That's the idea. Okay, now I want to go a little bit of other interesting thing. Okay, so if you look to the whole text, if you look to these books, which are considered to be the authoritative books, Agams, they have this primary philosophical foundation, which is mostly ascetic centric ideology. So they have this whole idea of asceticism, and they admit that soul is the ultimate truth for life forms. Well, material energy is also an independent force, but if we talk in realms of life and life force, what is the essence of our existence? Jainism says consciousness, which is the defining feature of soul. is the ultimate reality. Okay? Number second, this reality, this conscious reality is abided by karmas, which is material energy. So there is a constant, there is a natural relationship between conscious energy and the material energy from the beginningless time, naturally. Okay, this relation between consciousness and this karma is a beginningless time association. The entire goal is to free the soul from this bondage. So the goal or the purpose of our life is simply to separate this energy, because this is troublemaker. It does not allow consciousness to manifest in its own nature. It produces a kind of obstacle in realization of our true self. That's the idea. So this is the philosophical foundation of Jainism, and this is a kind of prescription not only for ascetics but all who follows the Jain precepts and principles. Okay. Now let us go to the next one. Okay. So based on this philosophical foundation, this is the idea of these books. Then do we have any aspect of sacredness with language? This is our question. Sacred aspect with language of Jain canons. Now we are coming to these books, these texts which are available to us as the scriptures of Jainism. And do they have any kind of sacred ideology associated with that? So far we have studied that there is nothing like sacred in the language itself, but it is only in the words and the foundation from where it is emanating that we have the notion of sacredness. But later on we see that the Jain belief also associated the sacredness with language. Okay, so how did they associate the sacred ideology with the language? Number first, I want to begin that the Prakrit or the Ardhamarg, the language in which the Jinas preached, was the local language. It was very local language. Why did he preach in the local language? So that people can understand, right? It can be easy for people to grasp what they want to convey to them. But it slowly turned to be a divine language. How the local language shifted to the divinity aspect, that's the idea. And gradually with the passage of time, it shifted to the divinity concept rather than being local concept. Okay? Then as soon as it evolved into divine form, the language itself as the divine, they introduced a lot of measures of when to use the language, how to use the language, who is eligible to use the language. Okay, and there are few things which are available for us in a traditional form, which are available not in a published form, but in a traditional form. The sacred idea associated with the language that are available is, number first, they emphasize the physical state. Okay, so when somebody holds this book, which is a sacred book, the physical purity is emphasized. So physical purity and surrounding purity. So what does that mean? That one should be physically pure and the surrounding should be pure. In Jain tradition, while reading the scriptures, they emphasize one thing, that there should be no any kind of wound which is bleeding. If it is in a form of bleeding, one has to abstain. Equally, the lay people and the monks and nuns, if in some part of the body there is a blood, they cannot read it. Okay, if in the area, in the geography where they are trying to read it, if some five-sensed being has been died, we cannot read that. We have to abstain from reading the original scripture. So the divine aspect is associated with language. So do you think that they should not read the book at all? Well, they can read the book. You are allowed to read the translation. We can read the book, but not the original words. Okay? So we all can read the translation, we can understand, we can grasp the commentaries, but the original words, the language which are in the Prakrit, no, we cannot read that language. So there are many other things associated with this physical purity aspect when they talk today of reading the books, sacred books. Then the second thing, the second important aspect, this is a very gross explanation of why they have abstained from reading the book in situation of physical impurity. Maybe they have some other reasons. Okay, because Jainism is in Jainism, a lot of principles are centered toward their practice of non-violence. Okay, so it is respect towards the non-violent to the beings, or is it respect towards being in some way or the other way? My understanding is they want to imply something about non-violence, even in the restriction of reading books. They have some idea of non-violence, of I don't know how to connect directly with that, but this is what is in my mind when I try to understand them. Okay, I don't have any strong evidence to show that what kind of nonviolence they are talking about when something is bleeding in the body, so that you should not read it. But if you look to the other prescriptions in Jainism, they are more centered towards the practice of nonviolence. And based on that, I am deriving this kind of conclusion that there should be something kind of that stuff. Okay, the second important element, time. When can we read this book? Okay, so we have these sacred books. Every book has its time. I cannot read this book afternoon. I can read certain book in afternoon, but I cannot read the fifth book in the morning. So every book has a kind of time span. What is the time in which this book can be read and not the other one, or the other can be read and this cannot be read? Okay, so there is a time for every book to be read, and morning or evening, and sometimes they abstain. When there are solar and lunar eclipses, they completely abstain from reading books, original books. They say that that time is a time to meditate. So just reflect on what you have already read, so don't read that. So during the time of eclipses, so this shows the whole science of, they have a different science as well when they are talking about text. It's also indicating some kind of solar understanding and the lunar understanding, and how these energies are producing something which is asking the people to not to follow the book or reading the book, or to emphasize more on different kinds rather than reading the books. What is the scientific foundation behind that is not yet clear, but they do have this kind of idea. Okay, and these texts are available equally to men and women. So people of both the genders can read these books, but in some of the Jain traditions, the females are not allowed to read the books, still up to now. Up to now, in some of the traditions, within the Jain traditions, they say that only 2 books, a female can read only 2 books. But for the other books, if she have to read, she have to learn it from a male member only. She can acquire the teachings only from a male member. A male member have to provide that. But it is not common in all. In some of them, everybody have the access to read books. Not only that men, monk and nun, but also the lay people have that freedom to read the books, while the others have this kind of restrictions. So there are differences of how they are restricted. And then these texts are allowed to be studied based on the seniority. Okay, so an ascetic who is newly initiated is not allowed to read this 5th book. An ascetic can read this book only when one has finished the 10 years of monkhood. The 1st book he can read, but not the 5th book. Okay, so the question is why seniority is important. I understand the seniority has been designated with the reading of the book based on the content, so that a disciple, so that a student understand and grasp the basics first, as we have different courses in different grades, right? A student of 1st grade does not read the 10th grade books. I think one of the notion of this seniority associated with the reading of the books is based on the content. The content, how the content has been grouped into these books, which gives this kind of course material for the students who are willing to read these books. So there is a purity aspect associated with our body. There is a seniority aspect associated with reading the books. Okay, but there is an exception to the seniority. So let me come to this exception. So somebody is a newly initiated monk, but if the preceptor feels that that monk is highly super intelligent and have some special quality, he can be given certain designation. So the designation of a spiritual teacher, upadhyay. And once anybody receives the designation, one is eligible to read all the books, despite being not fulfilling the rule of seniority. Okay, so that designation, when people achieve those designations, they are exempted from the seniority aspect. So there is this exemption as well available in Jain traditions of who can read the book. Can I go to the next? You have any questions?
Could you do us a favor and recite a small prayer in Sanskrit so we can...
Yeah, I'm coming to. I have it. I come to that. Okay. Yeah, I will come to that. So now I want to give the idea that how this religious ideology of sacredness of language is reimagined to fit the needs. Okay, the sacred idea is basically reimagined over and over and over and again to fit the needs, to fit the situations in which one exists, okay? And based on that reimagined philosophical ideology of sacredness, narratives are developed. So not only there are changes in philosophies, but also stories are constructed. Narrative literature is enriched to show the sacredness of the language, and I will be coming to one good example of that. And then ideologies get reshaped. So there is a constant process of embracing, cultivating, and then reforming. This is happening in all the traditions, and it is the need for all the traditions to basically survive and to communicate efficiently and effectively with the existing time frame, I believe, which gives them this kind of push to bring reformations in their own ideologies. Next. Okay. Now I want to bring this one good example from this book, fifth book, sacred book called as Bhagavati Sutra. And this book, I want to begin with Namaskar Mantra. So this is the sacred prayer, okay? And it is available in all traditions of Jainism today. So any sacred event will begin with this mantra, Namaskar Mantra. They call it Namaskar Mantra. And this is initiated at the beginning of all holy events. Okay, so let us initiate this prayer here. Will you join me? Sure. Okay, so be seated straight, your back and neck erect. Softly close your eyes. You can join your hands like this and place them near the center of your bliss, that is near your heart, and relax your mind and body and try to feel the energy and the vibrations that are produced by this language. Okay, I will request Samaniji Satya also to please. Arahantanam Namo Siddhanam Namo Ayariyanam Namo Uvajjayanam Namo Loye Savvasahunam Eso Panchanamokaro Savvapavanasano Mangalanam Cha Savvesing Padhamam Havai Mangalam Padhamam Havai Mangalam. The prayer concludes. Okay, so this prayer is available in this text, in the fifth book, and this is considered to be a very sacred prayer because of its language, because of the vibrations it produces. Okay. Now the question is, and the translation is right here. So when we say Namo Arhantanam, it is obeisance to the adorable ones, which is Jinas or the omniscient. Anybody who is omniscient, we pray. So there is no any personified name here in this prayer. Anybody who is an omniscient, I pray my obeisance to him. Then the second one is obeisance to the liberated ones, those who have liberated, meaning those who have separated the karmic bondage from the consciousness. They have achieved the perfect state. Okay, so I pay my obeisance to the liberated ones. The third one is obeisance to the preceptors. Whoever brings the teaching of purity, my obeisance to them. Number fourth, obeisance to the masters of scriptures, that is the truth teller. Those who have realized truth and who can transmit the truth. Anybody, those who have that power to transmit the reality, my obeisance to that masters. And the fifth is obeisance to all ascetics who are on the path of exploring the truth. Okay, so the speciality of this mantra is there is no name of any individual. This is a prayer towards the virtues. We all have these virtues, and wherever we find these virtues, our prayer goes to them. Irrespective of whether they belong to Jain, whether they belong to Buddha, Islam, Christianity, or whatever it be. If there are beings who have these powers, our obeisance to them. That is the idea. Any question? Okay, next. Now the question is, why was this mantra required in the fifth book? This mantra is not available in the first book. It is not available in the second book. It's not there in the third book. For the first time, this mantra, this auspicious prayer, was introduced in the 5th chapter of this book, 15th chapter of this book. Okay? So the question is, why was this required? When and why did it become a part of the scripture? Okay? And there is a lot of analysis about this. There is a lot of research on why, when, how it happened, or why was the need to introduce this kind of sutra. So since its study was considered to be particularly perilous and thus potentially obstructive, it was used with an aim of counteracting such impediments. So one of the reasons that explains that this mantra, this auspicious prayer, was introduced in these chapters, because the content of that chapter is very powerful. So if a student is not diligent, if a student has not purified himself, that could be an obstructive rather than helping. So this prayer will calm down that energy and will open the gate so that a student can master that information easily without any kind of obstacle. This is one of the ideas developed later by the commentators. Okay? But it does not give any other kind of suggested meaning about why it was introduced, rather than just bringing up this idea. And it clearly states, the book, I will be sending you this text for you, the chapter where we have this idea. They are later interpolations, is confirmed by the evidence of their absence in the other scriptures. So it's clearly stated that this introduction of this sacred sound is a later development. Okay? It was not originally the system of having this auspicious prayer in the beginning of any auspicious events, but it came on later on. Later it was developed and it became a part of the text. Can we go to next? Okay, now I want to go to one of the very important aspects of language, more specifically from the Jain context. So when they talk about scriptures, scripture is a book which is developed in some particular language, and as we have studied, the Jain scriptures are used in Ardha-Magdi language. Now, when they talk about scriptures, they say that scriptures are of two types. They have developed scriptures as two types, two forms of the scriptures. First is the physical form, and the second is the psychical form. In Jainism, we have this kind of categorization in almost many things. Okay, when they talk of mind, they say that mind is of two types, physical and psychical. Okay, when they talk of our body, they say that body is of two types, physical and psychical. So this categorization is very commonly available in Jain sources. Okay, so also this classification is available in case of the scripture itself, that is the language of this original book itself. So they say that this language, this scripture, is of two types, physical and psychical. What is physical? The symbolic way it is expressed is the physical aspect of the scripture. The symbolic script is the physical aspect of the scripture. What is the psychical aspect? The word, the meaning that it wants to convey. That is the psychical aspect of the book. Okay? So the physical script has their own places of origin and effect. Now any language, English, Hindi, Ardha-Magdi, whatever language we choose, and every language have symbols, and every symbol have its own place of origin. Okay? Like we study phonetics in English, right? And they have their own, where the sound are produced from. Okay? The term ma cannot be produced without lips. Ma. I cannot say ma without the help of my lips. I cannot say sh without the help of my palate. There are some sounds which are produced with the help of lips, some through the palate, some through the throat, some coming from the other combinations of our bodily parts. Okay? So every word have its own place of origin. For instance, the cerebral na, we have the term na in Prakrit language, which is the language of this book. So this is produced from the cerebral. With the help of the cerebral part of the brain, when it is combined with our mouth and lips, it is possible to produce the sound called as na, na, not na, not n dot, na, na, yeah. So it's come with a combination of different parts of the body, and according to the narration of this mantra text, they says that it produces electromagnetic force. When certain sounds are produced, they produce different energies, okay, affecting the bioelectricity of cerebral cortex. So it is bringing a different kind of impact on the different part of the body, whereas the dental n does not use the cerebral part. It's simply using the palate and the lips, n, right? Yeah. So it does not have such effect, while the nerve part have that effect. And later on, the vast occult system have introduced different aspects associated with the scripts. They say that A and I, okay, these two vowels have a common color, golden color. So with the occult belief system, they say that these two terms have a kind of color which is golden in nature. Naturally, they have this golden color. But the taste of A is salty, while that of I is astringent. So every word, letter have color, have taste, have impact, have different bodily part used, and different energies produced. Okay? This is the idea. And A is masculine, whereas I is feminine. My name is Rohini, so E at the end. I cannot have A at the end of my name. Otherwise, I'll turn into a masculine name. For a feminine name, it has to end with I. And there are many other options. I is one of the options. Okay? So they say that A is a masculine in nature and I is a feminine in nature. So they have various other aspects associated with this origin of the letters and the other occult belief system, like the golden color, the taste. Do you believe? Have you ever thought that language have taste? You can try now. G is a very big word, right? God. How do you feel when you say G? God. Okay, so you can now reflect on your own idea that do you feel any color? Do you feel any energy? Do you feel any taste? Do you come up with any kind of taste? The more you reflect on it, and you will start feeling those things. This is what this study is showing. Change in the dialectics may have resulted in the variants available. Now the point is, when we say the first line of the sacred mantra that we did, the prayer that we did, Namo Namo Arahantanam. But slowly and gradually, when we go to the commentaries, later development, we find different variants. Namo is used as Namo Arahantanam, then in a different variant is Namo Arihantanam. So there is a re rather than a. And in a third version, we have a third variant, Namo Aruhantanam. So why did this change happen? Right? If it was a sacred words, where did this change happen? So they say that some groups, some monks traveled in different directions, okay? A very huge group traveled towards the south of India because of one big famine, a very long-lasting famine occurred in the north. So the group have to move towards the south and different directions. So when the one group got shifted in this south direction, the dialectic of the southern language was something which influenced this prayer as well. So this influence could be a dialectic influence as well, without having incorporated the science of occult belief system. So we can see that how the languages are changed and how different ideologies are later on developed. Because of this dialectical shift, later on they are reinterpreted in a sacred form to adjust that difference. Okay, so this is one simple example of it. For some, physical script is sacred. For some group, physical script, the physical symbol itself is sacred, because they have emanated from the Jinnas, because they are the words of Omniscient, and therefore they pray the script, they pray the words, not the meaning but the letters. They say that this is very sacred and we cannot use it the way we like. We cannot write it anywhere and we can throw it. No, we cannot do that. We have to handle with strong sacred belief system. Okay, it cannot be used whenever and wherever we want. While they being the words of Jinnah, while the other have critically assessed the act of offering obeisance to the source of scriptures, that is language. While there are other groups who have severely criticized that is simply a means. Okay, there is nothing like sacredness to be associated with the language, but it is the word that we have to take and understand and practice. That is the essence of sacred path rather than the symbols itself. I think I have a last slide, one more. Yeah, so we see that if you look to the philosophical foundation of Jainism, it is more centered towards ascetic practice, where the whole goal is to liberate, to free the consciousness from the material energy, and achieve liberation. So consciousness is very central. But when we see to this later development of the prayers and how they are interpreted, how the mantra energies are interpreted, we find that slowly and gradually self-protection has also taken a shift from bodily protection. Okay, slowly these mantras were codified and reframed in order to bring also the bodily protections, and they were assimilated with the sacred idea. So self-protection is possible in the beginning of the scriptures. Earlier, they were possible only by purity of action and purity of your thoughts, not by any kind of external means. But later on, they developed that language can help us to overcome the bodily ailments. The external obstacles can be controlled by the power of these sacred words. They were developed later on. So now there is a shift in the approach of how they are using this text to overcome the obstacles which are external. Okay, so we see this, and narratives are used in common discourses. The ascetics who want to preach or give sermons on these philosophical ideas, they use different narratives. So in one of the narratives, they say that because of this Namaskar Mantra, they were protected from the fire. There are many stories associated with this Namaskar Mantra, many stories. And those narratives are used to produce an impact in the present scenario to overcome the existential conflicts that we have in our life, and how this mantra can help us to overcome those difficulties. So they are retold, which can facilitate to us in our context to overcome those difficulties. So there is a shift from self-protection, and this is very comprehensive. It will keep on evolving. This is my idea. And how far, how much, how they will try to bring this setup in a way which will be consistent to the orthodox ideology and also to become relevant to our current situations. Thank you very much. Yeah.